my experience, Jack tends to be thought of by viewers as extremely clever, playing a fool to lower people's expectations of him, while manipulating events and people in order to get what he wants. But the reality, in this movie at least, is a bit different. Sometimes Jack makes the best of the situations he finds himself in, demonstrating an understanding of the person that he's manipulating, getting what he wants by framing it as something they want. Other times, they see right through him, or at least the reasoning he gives them, and it's just kind of blind luck that gets him back into the fight. And in this film in particular, the stars have to align several times for him to achieve his goals. That isn't to say Jack himself isn't well written. As far as I can tell, he takes the only options he can think of at the time and runs with them, and that's fine. I'm simply establishing how his character is actually portrayed in the film, versus how he's remembered by the audience. Now, Jack has two goals in this film. One is to get the Black Pearl back from Barbossa. The second is to get revenge on him by shooting him with the one bullet Jack was given when he was murdered. So how exactly was Jack planning to accomplish these things prior to his encounters with the What was his original plan? With all the information presented in the film, and giving the film the benefit of the doubt, this is the best faith interpretation I can come up with. Number 1. Part 1. No. Step 1. Steal the interceptor from Port Royal. Let's give the film the benefit of the doubt and assume Jack is in Port Royal specifically to acquire the interceptor, rather than just to steal a ship, or a ship. Perhaps he heard rumors about the interceptor being the fastest ship in the Caribbean, in reality the second fastest, making it the only one with the hope of catching him to the boat. Let's also assume he planned to come into port on this day in particular, because he had heard there'd be a ceremony, and assumed the interceptor would be less protected than usual. Even allowing for that, he only has his sword and one bullet, so his plan requires that at some point, the interceptor will be left with little to no crew, be poorly guarded, and that he'll be able to distract any guards present from long enough that he can make a clean getaway, despite all the noise he'd have to make while preparing to sail. This is an absurd set of circumstances to hope for, and it's even more absurd that it actually happened in the case of the lack of crew and poor guarding. This ship is extremely valuable to the Navy. You could say that Jack doesn't have any other options, and had the ship been better protected, he'd just wait for a better opportunity to present itself and come up with a new plan to steal it. But given the importance of this ship, there really should be no better opportunity. It shouldn't be left unprotected. Period. Sail to Tortuga. Interestingly, Jack tells Will that he can't bring the ship into port by himself. This implies that he either can't dock it alone at all, or that if he were to attempt it, he'd risk damaging it by crashing into the dock or breaching it. In either case, causing him significant problems, as he'll need this ship to continue his purpose, as we'll go over in a moment. Step 3. Find gigs and put a crew together. No comments on this step. Step 4. Make a deal with Barbossa. Given that Barbossa and his crew significantly outnumber Jack, and as with the interceptor, there's no reason to assume the Pearl would be left completely unguarded, and the lack of any other implication as to what Jack was planning for this step prior to meeting him. The best I can come up with is that Jack would have planned to make Barbossa the same offer he does in the film, bringing Barbossa a ship and suggesting he start a fleet, with Jack as the captain of the Pearl, and Barbossa as captain of the Navy ship. The difference here being that said ship would have to be the interceptor instead of the Nautilus. If the interceptor is hard to manage without at least one other person, I imagine the Nautilus requires even more people. There's no way Jack could have stolen the Nautilus instead. So offering Barbossa the interceptor is the only thing that makes sense of this version of events. This doesn't work. Jack's reasoning for Barbossa taking the Dauntless as his flagship was, of course you'll take the Grandest as your flagship and use Dark. That same reasoning doesn't work when Jack's offer is a ship that's about the same size and slightly slower than the Black Pearl. Even if Barbossa agrees to the fleet idea, Jack's just gonna end up stuck with the Interceptor. I suppose that gets him close to Barbossa, therefore allows him an opportunity to come up with another scheme in the future to kill him and take the Pearl. The problem is, with a bargaining chip that's essentially the Black Pearl, but not as good, nothing's really stopping Barbossa from killing Jack and taking his ship away, which I'd argue is more likely if the best Jack can offer him is a trade for a slightly worse ship. Nothing in Jack's offer, even in the version with the Dauntless, really emphasizes what Jack himself brings to the table. But that offer had the advantage of Jack appealing to Barbossa's ego by saying he could have a grand ship. Point is, Jack doesn't have a concrete plan for completing his goals, just a weak plan to either A, offer Barbossa the second fastest ship in the Caribbean, which is nice to own in a fleet, but definitely not something he'd trade being the captain of the Pearl for, or B, get close to Barbossa to potentially come up with another plan in the future. Now, Jack is allowed to be a bad planner if that's an established character trait. The problem, as I see it, is all of the luck that factors into his plans actually working out for him. It's questionable if he would have eventually achieved either of his goals on his own with his original plan. But as events play out in the film, had it not been for several extremely lucky events, it's even less likely that he would have succeeded, and very likely that he would have died. Oftentimes, Jack doesn't create the situations that allow him to manipulate people, but instead, things just kind of work out in his favor. Sometimes he uses these opportunities to his advantage, and sometimes he squanders them. But even when the latter happens, things will somehow work out for him regardless. Here's a list of opportunities and information the plot simply hands to Jack. His former crewmates happen to find and assault him at just the right time and in just the right manner for him to be shown definitive proof that the curse is real. He needs to know this for the schemes he'll come up with later. Will Turner, the last person Barbossa needs to lift the curse, luckily finds out Jack knows of the Black Pearl and is desperate enough to save Elizabeth that he's willing to help Jack and bring the law leader back. Whatever problems would have been incurred by Jack attempting to sail alone are prevented as a result. The Dauntless is guarded by only 8 people, making it far easier to threaten them into abandoning ship than it otherwise could be, and none of the men are willing to try and overpower Jack and Will, who only have 1 bullet and their swords. They are both very skilled swordsmen, however, so I can see them winning the fight, but not without killing at least some of these men, making it far less likely that Will will be pardoned by the government at the end. Everyone leaves the Interceptor to search the Dauntless for Jack and Will, making it easy to steal, and no one notices them walking around, adjusting the sails, cutting all the ropes that tie the 2 ships together, and slowly drifting away until it's too late for the baby men to return to the ship. Again, if they faced any resistance, they only have 1 bullet and their swords, and in this case, they'd have to contend with an entire ship's worth of soldiers and sailors. They'd both be arrested and hanged, and the pirates would fail to lift their curse, continuing to kill and pillage indefinitely. Jack is freed by a cannonball happening to hit his cell during the fight, despite his crew being low on ammo and having to resort to other items that are smaller and less damaging. This allows him to accidentally get Will to include the crew's safety in his negotiation with his Barbossa, which in turn allows them to be alive to be freed by Elizabeth, which in turn allows her to convince them to ignore the code Jack is picked up by the Dauntless, thanks to Elizabeth's decision to start a fire. This gives him a much better bargaining chip for his deal with Barbossa than he would have had if he'd been able to keep the Interceptor intact as originally planned. Having the Dauntless as a bargaining chip helps convince Barbossa, where the Interceptor would have failed to do so. Each of these opportunities comes about due to factors outside of Jack's control, and allow him to eventually complete his goals. Jack's ability to read and manipulate people is also inconsistent. Sometimes he does it well, Jack convincing Barbossa about the fleet, and sometimes he fails horribly, Jack getting out of the brig, or put in the brig, sorry. And it's only blind luck that allows him to continue through the story. Jack pushing the cell door open. A small example of this is with the half-barrel hinges. Jack does nothing to hide the fact that Will having the same name as his father leads to his abrupt change of mind, even asking the question directly. Insert dialogue here. Will is desperate and in no position to question him further, so it's not detrimental to Jack in this moment, but it is an example of Jack being bad at manipulation, something Will calls him out on later in the what a man can do and what a man can't do scene. Insert dialogue here. After this, Jack would assume the matter is resolved, so he wouldn't suspect Will of betraying him later. Footage of Will hitting him with the oar. An example where it should cause more problems for Jack, though, is in the I'm having a thought here Barbossa scene. Jack suggests to Barbossa that they run of a flag of truce, and he negotiates the return of the medallion. This doesn't appeal to Barbossa's sensibilities at all, and Barbossa quickly dismisses it. Barbossa gets sick of him and tells his crew to lock Jack in the brig. This should be it for Jack, as the other heroes don't even know he's alive, much less have any way to rescue him. When everyone gets captured, Jack would still be below in the brig. He wouldn't be able to accidentally convince Will to ensure the crew isn't harmed. Thus, they wouldn't be around to save Jack at the end of the film, meaning he gets recaptured and hanged. But luckily, the door to his cell gets hit, and allows him to be there when Will negotiates with Barbossa. Later on, in the I'll buy you another hat scene, Jack tries a completely different approach, telling Barbossa all the things he could gain through their partnership, while subtly convincing Barbossa to give up the world to him. Perhaps this is the result of failing to manipulate him before, and trying a new tactic. I just find it interesting that he couldn't do this the first time around with Barbossa, given he knows him better than, say, the two guards he manipulated into an argument earlier to distract him. Pirates 1 issues. The coins have to get wet to call the pirates, as shown in the scene where Elizabeth almost drowns. The likelihood of however many they spent in trading getting wet so they could track them down is so ridiculously, astronomically low, that the idea that any of this happens in Jack, Will, and Elizabeth's lifetime is laughable. Even with one coin left, it could have easily been centuries before a given coin happened to get wet, depending on how it was handled by someone. I mean, you've lost coins before, I imagine. Like in your couch, for example. If that happened with even one coin, okay, maybe the couch isn't the best example. But let's say you lost it in your house, and it rolled into a spot that wasn't easily reachable. It's gonna be there for decades. And at that point, like, the pirates are screwed. For example, if they kept it in a hidden compartment of a dresser and then fell off a cliff and drowned. Set of events that has very nearly happened to Elizabeth. He might remain there, indoors and away from moisture, indefinitely. There's a caveat that lessens this issue a tiny bit, which I'll explain further down. Child Will's coin didn't get wet at any point between his ship getting attacked and him getting rescued by the Navy, which presumably would have caused it to call to the pirates again, allowing them to continue tracking him and board the Navy ship that was right near the Black Pearl. We know it couldn't have gotten wet because the tracking effect is shown later on to last hours, allowing the pirates to find it in the mansion. Elizabeth takes out her coin, which is covered in dust, implying she hasn't worn it for a while, at least, because of a dream. This conveniently leads to her wearing it when she falls into the water, thus leading Barbossa and Co. to the water. Elizabeth luckily misses the rocks when she falls into the water, something that's lampshaded in the film. In a society that loathes pirates, how did Elizabeth learn parlay, which is apparently something that only applies to pirates, and therefore wouldn't be widely passed around to non-pirates, would it? This is doubly unlikely given that her dad is very against her hearing about pirates because he's concerned about the effect it'll have on her. Who's been telling the governor's daughter about pirate lore? News stories, like that of Jack's adventures, are one thing. Learning the pirate code seems like it would be outside of what she could access. Luckily for her, and the plot, the pirates don't realize the code doesn't apply to her. Specifically, Pentel Margetti, I'm referring to. Will happens to see Elizabeth being taken by the pirates during the chaos of the pirate raid. Elizabeth not seeing the pirates' skeletons forms while being taken to the ship is an issue because when we see her reaction to this later, she freaks out. Her using Will's last name hinges on her being able to make coherent decisions, something she wouldn't be able to do if she was freaking out because she saw the skeleton. The pirates grabbing Jack while the moonlight is coming in at just the right angle to allow his skeleton arm to be visible, thus showing Jack the curse is real and allowing him to use it as leverage for his plans later on is mighty convenient. His former crewmates find him in the jail at just the right time for one of them to choke him onto the moonlight, revealing to Jack that the curse is real, which he'll need to know further. Of all the people to be standing there while Norrington's making plans with the governor and Will shows up, it seems convenient that the two guards who talk to Jack are among them, giving Will the info he needs to go to Jack for help. This leaves Will, the one person whose blood the pirates still need, to help Jack escape, because the pirates kidnapped the one person he's in love with. This gives Jack the leverage he needs to gain Barbossa's trust later. It also gives Jack a second person to help sail and dock the ship he steals, allowing him to set sail with a crew in a timely manner instead of dealing with whatever complications he's alluding to if he were to attempt it alone. Also lucky for Jack, the pirates kidnapped someone Will is in love with and willing to break the law to rescue. Jack's belongings, including weapons, are right outside the cell, allowing him to easily grab them when he escapes. If Jack's belongings were simply in another room, there's a high likelihood he would have been caught along with Will. Speaking of which, how does Will get away with visiting and making conversation with a pirate without a guard present? Also, how did they get away? How did they get from the cell all the way off the premises without being spotted? To add on to the Navy's ineptitude, they have a dog running around in scenes for some reason. While this isn't how Jack ended up escaping, it's a big risk when they could have, I don't know, hung the keys on a hook in another room? No matter how well trained the dog is, having it openly carry the keys around risks allowing the prisoners to escape, while hanging the keys up elsewhere would leave no chance for them to escape, outside of the half-barrel hinge technique it uses, which they don't know about. So that's fine. That's still a risk because they don't know about it. But they would know about the keys, I would think. The entire crew of the Interceptor abandons it to search the Dauntless for Jack and Will, so that they face no resistance when they steal it. Lucky for them, since they only have 2 swords and 1 bullet to defend themselves with. Jack tells Will he can't bring the ship into port by himself. I guess he had no solution to this when he was working alone earlier? Question. Barbosa and Co. didn't know during the first night / week / however long it took to travel to another port that the curse was real. Food turns to ash in their mouths. They, or at least Barbosa, can't feel anything. And was it cloudy all night for however many nights it took them to travel there? There's really no reason why it would take until after they started giving away coins for them to realize the curse was real. There's one small upside to this, which is that this means the number of coins they actually gave away should be relatively small. But let's say they gave away even just 10 coins. Each one has the potential to not get wet for centuries, depending on how they're handled. Now, I do admit that a majority of people they interacted with and sold coins to could have been seafaring people if they went to somewhere like Tortuga, for example. But that doesn't mean all of them would be. And of the ones that stay on land, it only takes one leaving a coin in a spot where it can't easily get wet to fuck up everything for the pirates. Which, again, brings us back around to the point of how unlikely it is that they found all the coins within Jack, Will, and Elizabeth's lifetime. There's a fair chance, maybe, that they would find all the coins, but not necessarily within their lifetimes, which needs to happen so that they can all work together to eventually win.